Hello, I'm gonna explain the basic types of Python and their use. So first, I'll start with the explanation of what are these different types. So first, we'll have the integers, and all of these types have an abbreviation in Python. So in Python, integers are int type. These ones can be any sort of integer number. So it could be 23, maybe 4, even 0, or -3. Then we have the float type. And yes, the abbreviation is still float. These are any numbers that do have decimals. So, for example, integers could not be 23.4 or maybe 123.12.3. But you can also have integers be a float type, for example 3.0. And well, that's the float type. The next type will be string, and for string the abbreviation is str, and this is basically text. Anything that is text. So hello will be a string, but we need to specify there's a string. In order to do so, we have the quotation marks. Anything that's inside quotation marks is a string. So any keywords you put in there, string. Even numbers are strings. You just have to use the quotation marks, and the program already knows it's a string and not an integer. So it's also important to remember that the same variable can be an integer, a float, and a string. For example, the 3 can be an integer as this, it could be a float like this, and it could be a string like this, or even it could be a string like this. It's just the quotation marks that's the important part. And the last type that's important, it will be the Boolean type. The abbreviation will be BOL, and this just has two values. It will be true or false. So we can check the value, the type of anything we give to Python with the function type. So we have the function type, and inside we'll have 23. It's an integer. But what about 2.3? It's a float. And it's also good to remember that, for example, 20.0, it's an integer, yes, but it's a float type because we have the decimal part there. And then we could have hello again in quotation marks. It's a string. Remember, the quotation marks are actually important. If you didn't have a quotation mark, in here I have an error because hello here is not a string, it's a variable. But I have never defined this variable, so I cannot do anything with it, and asking its type, well, doesn't have a type. So after that, it's also important to remember that the number is also a string if we have quotation marks. So it's not that it's 23, it's 23 in quotation marks that makes it the string. And the last one will be the Boolean. So type true is a Boolean. So it's important to remember that doesn't mean that the only things that are Boolean is if you actually write true or false. True or false is an attribute, so anything that has a value of true and false is a Boolean. So for example, we can have 3 equals 3. But what is important to remember is that in Python, in order to have a comparison or an equality, we must have 2 equal signs. If we have just one, we are assigning a value to a variable. So, if we tell this to Python, it will tell us true because it's a Boolean expression. It will give us true. And again, we can have another example where it's false. And so we will have some Boolean signs, some Boolean symbols, or operands, or how do you want to call them. The important part is we have double equal sign, which is equals to. We have the exclamation mark equals, which means it's not equal to. We can also have is less than or more than, or we can have less than or equal, and we have the more or equal than. Any expression containing any of these is going to have a Boolean value. And now we're going to see what is the use of these values, different types of values. So first we have the integers and the float type. They're basically technically the same thing. Integer just meaning that it will have less space to contain the information, so it has no decimal point, but they're basically the same thing. There's numbers. So 3, it will be an integer. We can multiply it by 3, it's gonna give us 9. As we can have 2.4 times 7.6, and there's the answer also in a float. So the reason for it to be an integer and a float is just the float has more bits, so it's able to store decimals and have decimal values, and the integer doesn't. So if you know you're not gonna have decimals, it's more convenient to have your integers, but whenever there's a decimal you have to use float. Now the string. The string is used for text basically. So if I go hello, it's gonna be a string. It's just gonna tell me hello. We can have also print hello, and it just tells us hello. Again, this is way different than just saying hello, because this will be a variable, but we haven't defined a variable hello. For example, if we said hello is equal to 3, then I said hello, the answer is 3, it's an integer. If I check the type of hello, it's an integer. So it's important to have the quotation marks. It's not just having text that makes it a string. So the thing is that strings work differently than mathematical numbers like integer and float. We can still add, for example, hello can be added to world. But what this is gonna do is it's gonna join both strings together. And we can still, for example, multiply. So we have hello, 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 hello. So this it's gonna repeat the string you give, the number of times you give it. So yeah, the string is gonna be useful for text, and also just remember that inside the quotation marks you can also have numbers. So this is not gonna give you the result of multiplying 34 times 5. It's gonna repeat 34, 34, 34, 34, 34. So now for the Boolean type, the Boolean type is gonna be useful for conditionals. So for example, if 3 is equal to 3, we want to print 3. Else, I'm gonna print 2. So I run this program, save it. It's gonna print me 3. Why? Because this expression is true. So this is equivalent of just having true here. So we run it, and we have also 3. But in the case that we had an expression that was not true, so it's false, so else is gonna run and it's gonna print us 2. So this is useful, the use for Boolean is generated for conditionals. So for example, it's also the conditional of a while loop. So if we do this, let's say print 3. If we run it, it's gonna run infinitely. So I'll have to restart the shell. This is because it's the same again as just saying while true. So it's just gonna repeat and repeat this loop. Again, this condition is usually used for when a condition is met inside the loop, so then it gets out, it breaks out of the loop. And for example, and that will be if the while was false. In this case, for example, it doesn't even run it. Or let's give it our value, maybe x equals 3. Yeah. So we're gonna have, yes, x is assigned to 3. But in the while loop, we're gonna have that x is gonna be 4. So what it's gonna do is just print one time, because it enters the while loop. Right now the value is true, because x is 3, so 3 is equal to 3. But inside the first loop of the while function, we have that x is now equal to 4. So it runs it again, it checks for this Boolean value, and 4 equals to 3 is false. Therefore, the while doesn't continue, it breaks, and our program ends.